Okay, welcome everybody. We welcome to our online meeting of Magenta Code. Today, our topic is here and only path to web development. We are happy to present the 3 people that were activity in web developer, and we share their only ways into the page. But after we start, it's important remember about our okay. Sorry. Okay, it's important remember about the event code of conduct, because we have take the picture and record that event. It's important. If you know you are right, you write us email about the use decision, and we can remove all party, and I can use your phrase. Okay. Continuing. Please turn off your cameras and your microphones, because we need silence for our speakers. But when we have a special part for questions, remember to share our experience, our meeting in social media, and remember our social networking is Magenta Codes, and mention women maker, and our husband, more women in tech, more women in open source. Okay. Yeah. In this moment, we have a tour of your camera, please. Turn on your camera, because I like the take photos and group. And if you can say hi for our photo. Okay.
Whoever agrees to appear on our social media and in our summary in a blog, then please turn your camera in, and we will take a reminder of this event. Let me know, Joy, if you.
Yeah, hi everyone. Looks beautiful people today. Okay. No, it's okay, Marisol. Okay, we continue. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, let's do it. Okay, we can see my screen. Yeah, our presentation. In this moment?
No.
No?
Now
okay.
It is.
Okay, you can see it now. You can see. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Now? Okay, thank you. Okay, we continue. Today our schedule is, we have 3 amazing talks about our roadmap for success in web developer, in JavaScript, important concepts, and how to assess your web developer sales and interview. And we have amazing speakers today. We can start with the free. I can do. I'm sorry, I forget our presentation that I was seeing. Okay, Magenta Code is the community for women, and our goal is to share in knowledge and inspiring and motivation for women in Stockholm. But right now, we're happy to share our knowledge with the world, because we have many people in the other countries. That is our team. I am Johanna Salinas. I part the co-founder of the Magenta Code, and this is Alejandro Ferreira. Today is our speaker, so thank you for her. This is Duni Rivas, who's amazing woman in data. And this is Luisa Giraldo. She's a full stack with developer. Okay, continue. Oh my God.
Maybe I can tell you guys a little bit about how Magenta started. We got together and we exchanged some ideas. We saw some challenges that we were facing because we are all immigrants in a new country where we did not speak the language. So we started to get together with some ideas and try to create a community with some initiatives of inclusion, support, development, and gender equality in this current technological revolution. So we are pushing for breaking down barriers here, especially for immigrant women around the world. So yes, welcome to our community, and hopefully you guys will have fun today in the talks.
Okay, let me 1 second because something happened with my screen. Okay.
And maybe we can start with our first talk. We can start with Trinity. That she's gonna talk to us about a roadmap for success in web development. Super excited. She's a student of computer science in San Jose State University in the US. She interned as a software engineer at 3 tech companies, Tesla, Roku, and Vidbase, in her junior year. She also founded CS Spartan, a large engineering community for CS and SE students at her school. Also joining Phi Theta Kappa, I think it's pronounced, a honor society as a webmasters. VP volunteers at TA in a laboratory, and worked as a senior mentor for 2 years. She is on a journey of learning how to be better herself every day, and love to help to find a great path in web development. So we know that getting started is not easy, but when you don't, and especially when you don't know how to start. In this talk, she will share some tips, tricks, and lessons learned in her engineering journey, specifically how she builds her personal brand and how she landed these 3 amazing tech internships and gets into web development, still being a junior in college. So welcome, Trinity.
Thank you so much for the introductions. Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, my name is Trinity, and today I will be talking about a roadmap for success in web development. First of all, I would like to thank Magenta Code for inviting me for the events today, and thank you so much for putting together this amazing group of women to succeed in tech. Table of content. So first of all, I'll go over who am I, quick introduction about myself, how I build my personal brand, roadmap for success in your web development journey, and some time for a Q&A. Introduction about myself. My name is Trinity. I'm currently residing in Silicon Valley in the US. Again, I'm a senior in CS at San Jose State University. I intern at Tesla, Roku, and a small startup in Silicon Valley called Vidbase. And right now I'm building my personal brand, building a community for computer science and software engineering developers with a alternative goal to become a full stack web developer, and in the future will be managers. How I build my personal brand. So it's really important to build your personal brand early on in your career. First of all, of course, will be your resume. So make sure to keep your resume very simple format so that machine can read it, because most of the time your resume will be read by the machine. So read the job description, use the action word action word and the keyword that is actually in the job description, copy and paste that to your resume so that robot can read your resume. Keep it very simple. It is a 1 page, showcase all of your projects, skills, awards, work experience, education. And next would be GitHub. Really take advantage of GitHub, because one of the skills that you have to eventually pick up in the workforce is how do you GitHub? How do you Git? So really start practicing that skills right now. Leverage your GitHub to push all of your projects, especially personal projects, to showcase the recruiter, the companies that you can actually code. You can program in like C, Java, C++, Python, to really distinguish yourself from other candidates. Also, you can use GitHub to collaborate with your team, or collaborate with anyone, or contribute to open source. That is also one of the really good skills to show on your portfolio. Leverage LinkedIn. Treat LinkedIn like a second resume, because there's a lot of things on your resume that you can't really show. So really use LinkedIn effectively. Like I put like an about me sections, showcase all of my skills, contact info, what I do, and I also put a lot of like linked and photo to show people what project did I build or what article did I write. So yeah, you can also use LinkedIn recommendations, which is ask your friend, your engineers, or your colleague to give you a recommendation on LinkedIn. It will look really good on your profile. Also take advantage of LinkedIn search engine. You can really search for anyone on LinkedIn, and send them a connect request with a message, or like ask them to start like a quick 15 minutes call for you to learn more about the company, learn more about the people and the work they do, because networking is really crucial on your career success. So there's a time when I would co-email recruiters on a company that I really want to work for, and she really liked my portfolio, and she's quickly moving forward to the next round in the hiring process. So yeah, make sure you expand your network effectively starting today. Really important for a web developer to have a personal website. This is not mandatory, but it's really nice to have, since you're building a website. You might as well just build one for yourself. Treat it like a personal project to build your own website. In this website, I keep it very simple. I put my technical experience, achievement, and some article that I wrote, and then all the contact information about me. Other than that, to build your personal brand, your portfolio, really leverage on social media platforms. That I recommend is Medium. It is where I put all of my articles, the things I've learned, all the blog posts, or you can share a project that you did, lesson you learned, or any tips that you want to share on Medium. And one funny story is that Magenta Co found me through this article that I wrote about how to set up Storybook, Next.js, TypeScript, SCSS, and Next. So yeah, really promote yourself through these platforms. And one of the good things about Medium is that you will get paid by writing your article. A similar platform to Medium is Deb.to. So Deb.to is similar to Medium, but quite different, because Medium, you can write technically about anything, any topics. But for Medium is up. But for Deb.to is mainly for developers. So there will be a huge community of developers who will really support you. You can write anything you've learned on your developer journeys and post it on Deb.to to showcase people your skill and what you're capable of. There are also other platforms out there, Twitters. If you're really into Twitters, there are a huge community of developers on Twitter as well. Or if you want to do YouTube, creating videos, creating tutorials to show people how to create a project, how to set up your environment. As is Instagram. I post content on Instagram daily to show people what I'm working on, any struggle that I'm facing, or or just share my journey on a daily basis with people. So since I really like taking photos, Instagram is my personal choice, but there are so many out there for you to choose from. So building a personal brand as a web developer or as a software engineering is really important. So you really should start doing that early on, whether it's building project, contributing to open source, or creating a social media platform for yourself, so that you can really showcase the companies, the recruiters, or the engineers what you're capable of doing. And at the same time, it also showcase your personality in a way that your work really. So really find what you're passionate about, what works for you, because everyone's different. And yeah. Next up will be, since I've covered introduction, I cover personal brand. Next will be how to succeed in web development. So you've probably seen these roadmaps online, so you can really search for web development roadmap, and that will be the first thing that pop up. Since there are so many informations in these graphs, I will really jot it down to the basic minimum of what you need to know in order to start your web development journey today. First off, to start something, you really need to know what it is. Like, what is web development? So really dig into knowing the basic foundation of how browser works. And I recommend to have like some sort of programming languages knowledge before starting web development. For example, like Python, C++, JavaScript, before you jump into learning something like web development. Or have basic knowledge of data structure and algorithms, since it will become very handy. You have to eventually use it. But you don't have to know everything. Like, just know the very basic data structure, like array, maps, trees, or some sort of sorting algorithms. And know what front end is, what is back end, what is the code editors that you use, what is it package managers, or other basic terminals commands that you have to use. You will move on to the front end. Front end is what you see on the browser, what you see right in front of you. And for front end, I would highly recommend to starting with front end first, even though you really like the back end, because if you're going for the back end, you will eventually build a tool and software that will integrate with front end. So it's really crucial and important to start learning front end. So with front end, you have to learn HTML and CSS and JavaScript. One of the lessons I've learned is that really to build a strong foundation with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript before you jump into any other frameworks like React, Angular, or Next.js. Is because frameworks is like on a step 2. You need to start building a strong foundation in step 1 with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript before jumping into more complex topics like frameworks. And last but not least is testing, because as developer, we want to build a really high quality website, high quality code, which means that those are code that is well tested. So you need to know how to test your code. After learning about front end, then you moving forward to the back end. For the back end, you need to know what the server is, how to communicate between the server and the client, and then you will pick a programming language. There are many programming language for the back ends. For example, Python, JavaScript, Java, etc. So therefore, try to do your research and find what is the language that you prefer, because there's no right or wrong answer. Try to pick the one that is really popular, that is current in use right now, because you don't want to pick a language that is pick a language, learn it for a period of time, and then it's like no one will use it anymore. So yeah, next would be a database. How do you store data in a database? How do you pull and edit data in the database? Because in the server, you are mainly working with how to send data and send and receive requests from the clients. How to work with APIs, and again with testing. Testing is really important. You can also look into what is called test-driven development, because it's a really popular concept right now, and it's really will help you write better code. So how do you learn all of those concepts? There are so many resources online that you can take advantage of. These are some of my personal favorite. When I started, I've used MDN Web Docs to search any topics about web development. I promise you it will be there. They will have any resource that you're looking for. I took a Udemy course for 3 months and learned both front end and back end in that period of time. And it was really helpful, and it is what helped me to learn my first internship at Roku. So you don't have to spend a lot of time on a boot camp, since there are so many resources online that you can take advantage of. I also am reading books. Currently, I'm reading the first 3 books, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, jQuery, and You Don't Know JavaScript. Those are really great resources if you're someone who prefer reading instead of watching tutorials. Also YouTube. And if you prefer reading blog posts, then there's also Medium and Dev.to that I mentioned earlier. So yeah, moving on to the tutorial step will be building projects. And building project is really important. Learning is just the first step, and starting building projects will be how you apply those knowledge that you've learned from the tutorial and actually building something from scratch. This will be a lot more meaningful, and there's will be a lot more that you can learn to apply those knowledge to build something that is actually useful and valuable. Build a project that provide value, and build something that and versus just build something that for the sake of building it. You have to think about a project that will solve a problem, and a project that solving a problem, or it's a project that an app that someone will use that actually meaningful. So company will look at it at when you're building a project that is really valuable, and someone will use in the future. There will be challenges, of course. There's nothing as easy or easy shortcut around. So if you don't know how to start, really start from the basic. Like I mentioned, really know the basic of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript before you jump into frameworks. If you get stuck, get help. Reach out to the community to get help. Or one of the tips that I always use is that when you get stuck in a problem, try to break it down into smaller steps so that it's easier for you to handle. If you feel like you're lost motivations or you don't know what to do, sometimes you sit back and then set your goals. Find the one that really speak to you. Seek goal that aligns with your values. Reflect on it, evaluate, and really get help. Because on this journey, you will really, you're not alone. There are a lot of times when I feel like, oh, this is so hard. I don't know how to handle this. I just take a time, reach out for help, ask your mentor, ask your colleague, write down things that you want to do. And one of the things that I do is that I keep a list of all the accomplishment that I have, so that I will look back on when I feel down. It really motivated you to do more. And again, have a growth mindset, and really reminded yourself that you're capable. You're capable of doing it, and you can do anything. So after you've learned about web development, front end, back end, is something that you really want to do, you might want to look at any career path that you want to take. For example, you can either pursue front end or back end if you prefer one or another, or you can, pursue both, which is full stack, is a combination of both front end and back end. There are many paths that you can show. You can do freelancing if you prefer the open, the work from home environment, or like you can work anywhere for anyone, or you can do open source, contributing to existing open source project or create a project and make it open source. Or if you have a really good idea for an app, then build it. Build that app and then create a startup from it. It'll be really cool to be, your own CEO, but building a startup is difficult, but you will eventually learn a lot. Or you can use in a usual route, which is work for a company. You can either choose a startup, a big corp, any company, because wherever you work, I think there will be a lot of opportunity to grow. And a more advanced career path will be either engineering management or product management. We'll really look into it and research to see what works for you, what will be the best option for you. Some of the checklists before you start, really dive deep into the journey in web development would be, ask yourself, is it something that you're really passionate about? Is it something that you really wanted to do? If the answer is yes, go for it. Or if the answer is no, you're not sure, then I still think it's a good thing to try it out for a couple of months or a couple of weeks to see what it is, to see what it actually is, and how can you use it to build software. Once you know that there's something you want to do, really create a plan, because you don't want to just learn it for the sake of learning. Really create a concrete plan of like, I will finish this course, or I will finish this book for the next 2 months, for the next 3 months, so that you have set your goal and milestone that you want to hit, and have deadlines so that it motivates you to work harder, and it create a plan, that a long-term or a short-term plan that will actually take you, or like help you to reach the goals that you want to reach. And make sure you commit to it. Any plan, there will be commitment. You have to repeat what you're doing constantly and commit to what you say you're going to do, so that the goal is there and the dream will be achieved. Also, one of the important aspects is to prep for interview. Once you learn the skill, the knowledge, you will be interviewing for the jobs that you want to apply. So interview and prep is one of the topics that we'll cover in later events, of the events today. So make sure you stay tuned for it. And again, never give up, because if someone can do it, if I can do it, if others can do it, if she can do it, you can do it too. Some recommendation that I have, some tip that I've learned along the way, is that find your learning styles, because everyone learns differently. Some people prefer reading books, some people learn with tutorials, some people learn by reading blog posts, or some people just learn by doing, by creating projects. So really find your learning styles and learn it quickly, because in tech, technology will evolve and then things will change. Therefore, it's really important to be able to pick up the skill quickly and apply it. Number 2 is that you don't have to know everything. I struggled in the beginning when I started learning a concept. When I started to learning this concept, I figured there are so many things that I don't know, and I just keep searching, and then researching to really understand that concept. But the thing is, sometimes you have to accept that as fact and move on, because you don't have time to sit down to learn everything. You have to start coding. So remind yourself that you don't have to know everything, accept the concept or the thing as fact and move on. Because later on, when you build projects, you will eventually facing problems, errors, and bugs that you have to, again, deep into the concept again. You will eventually learn it. Documents your learning. You don't have to document everything, but try to document things that is important, like bookmark the articles that you really like, or write down or highlight the concept that you really think that is important, that you have to refer to it later on in the futures. So document your learning. Or at the same time, me personally, when I document my learnings, I do a really good job at documenting what I've learned or the concept that I think will be useful. Later on, I use that as a blog post to promote myself, to show people that I've learned that concept before, and it's something that I can teach people. Last but not least, is seek help from the community. There are many platforms out there. If you're stuck on an error and a problem, put it on Stack Overflow, or publish that issue on GitHub, or just any platform. GitHub, Stack Overflow. There's one more I can't remember, but there's so many platforms out there, and you will be amazed how people will be willing to help you and sit down with you, set up a call with you to help you solve your problems. If there is, 4 things that I want you to take away from this talk today, is to really start building your personal brand today. Showcase what you're capable of, what you can do. Really important to make you stand out from other applicants. There are so many people with amazing experience out there, and what sets you apart from others is your personal brand. Find what it is that you're passionate about and work towards it. Expand your network. Really important. Networking is really going to determine the success of your career. I spend a lot of time reaching out to people, ask what they're doing, ask what their advice for me, and how can I better myself every day. And really take advantage of that search engine, because anything that you want to learn about, there will be an article, there will be a YouTube tutorial for it. So really take advantage of that search engine, the information online nowadays. And there's something that you want to learn or you want to pick up, there will be a resource for it. And build your career with a plan and a goal. Set a long-term goal. Think about your age right now. Take your age and add 5, 10 into it. In the next 5 to 10 years, what is it that you want to achieve? And you want to make that a very detailed and concrete goal, not just very general goal that everyone else is doing. Really find a goal that will motivate you to reach towards it, not just a random goal or other goal that other people are reaching for, but find the one that will work for you. And again, if I think that's it. Time for Q&A.
Hey, thank you, Trinity. Thank you so much for your talk. Great talk.
Thank you.
So we have a couple of questions here. Do you have any suggestion for open source projects related to web development or something like that?
Yes, you can search for popular frameworks or popular or just any project out there. You can really use that GitHub search. What I do is that if I'm interested in helping with React JS framework, then I will search for React, find that repo, go to the issue sections, and then find the one that you can filter it by a tag. Filter it by good first issue for beginners. There's always that tag in any popular repo. So find that tag, looking for a good first issue for beginner, and then start reading through the code base and start picking up, or you can even reach out to the open source maintainers to help guide you in solving the issue. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We have another question. Do you have any 3 main actions that you did to get your first internship when you started in the industry?
Yes. Number 1 is I network. I I was so fortunate to have a great group of friends who've already landed their internship at Google, at PayPal. I talked to them, I reached out to them to find out what they did, and surround yourself with people who you want to be with, who you want to become. Find people who are like 1 to 2 steps ahead of you and ask them, how did you do it? I surround myself with people who landed their internship before. I ask them questions, and then I find out that web development is something I really interested in. I took a web development course on Udemy, and that's how I pick up my skill in web development. And then I'm preparing for interview. In the later talks today, you learn how to prepare for your interview. But that's really important. How you build your brand, how you sell yourself during an interview. That is really important, because there are many engineers who have great knowledge, great skill, but you can't handle the pressure of communicating or like expressing your idea in the pressure of an interview. Then you can't really land that job that you really want. So to summarize, networking, start learning today, taking a course, free online courses, and preparing for interview. Really important.
Thanks, Trinity. We have another question over here. How do you keep a strict schedule and multitask between the books and the courses and everything that you mentioned that you're reading, doing, Instagram, social media, everything? How do you do it?
Right here, I have a calendar of my own. So what I do is I do time blocking. So everyone has 24 hours a day, right? So really find out that schedules. I do time blocking, what it means that I block time during the day, like leave time for like lunch, dinner, and exercising. And then for the rest, I would put in all the tasks that I need to do. I use different applications, like what I use the calendar. I use Todoist to quickly jot down all the checklists of the things that I need to accomplish today. And I also I use Notion to plan out my short and long-term goal. Like for example, right now it's September. So in August and September is where companies will start hiring. So I have a list of companies that I want to apply for. And I really set a deadline for each of them that I need to apply to this company. I need to start setting for interview. For Instagram, I really strict. On the weekends, I would spend the time on the weekend taking photos, think of brainstorming content that I want to post throughout the week. So I will post photo daily, and then by the time the week starts, I will have photos and all the content that I want to post already. So I gradually post them throughout the day. Like I spend time preparing for the talks today, and coding, programming, you really have to sit down and prioritize what is most important right now and put it in your schedule and make sure you commit to it, because it's really easy to plan it out, but it's really hard to commit to it. Yeah, set a schedule and stick to it.
Okay, Trinity, thank you so much. Thank you for the amazing talk. And now, Joa, you can take the show. I think that you're muted, Joanna.
Okay, we continue with the next talk about the JavaScript important concepts. We continue with our speaker, Auxiliadora Martinez. She's from Costa Rica, I think. But Auxiliadora, welcome. You can share your screen and make a small presentation about you.
Sure. Thank you so much. Let me share my screen first of all. Looks like, yeah. All right, let me know when you can see my screen.
Nice, I can see. We can see.
All right, perfect. Well, first of all, thank you so much to Magenta Codes for the opportunity of being here, sharing some of the knowledge that I have. The presentation that I have today, the talk is about JavaScript, some important concepts that I think are crucial when it comes to web development. The first thing, a brief introduction of myself. My name is Auxiliadora Martinez. I live in Costa Rica, in Central America. I'm a computer science engineer. I hold a Master Information Systems Master degree, and I have more than 15 years of working experience. I started as software developer, and I move on different positions. Right now, I'm tech lead on a project and also a delivery manager. Well, this is the agenda I have for the talk. The first topic that I talk about is why should we learn JavaScript? Why it's so important? Our first speaker already talked a little bit about that, but I'll go a little bit, I explore a little bit more about that. Also, after that, I'm going to talk about the concepts that I think are really important to understand in JavaScript, which are this keyword, closures, variable hoisting. And once we have covered that, I'm going to recommend some resources to learn about these concepts and some others, of course. And at the end, we are going to have some time for questions. So the first thing is, why should we learn JavaScript? During my career, I have performed hundreds of front-end interviews. And I can say that what I have found out is that a lot of candidates don't manage correctly JavaScript concepts. It's a funny thing because a lot of that people have experience on Angular, React, or some other libraries, but they don't know correctly some JavaScript concepts. And the thing is that you might work with Angular, React, Vue, or any other library or framework, but JavaScript is actually the foundation. JavaScript is what is behind the scenes. And sometimes, depending on the problem that you have, the best solution for that problem sometimes needs to be written in JavaScript. And also, while you are working with Angular or React or any other library, a lot of time you have to deal and solve issues that have to do with JavaScript, even though you are working with Angular or React. So it's really important to understand JavaScript, and of course, JavaScript along with HTML and CSS to be able to provide a better solutions for the problems. And some other important aspect is that, well, JavaScript is one of the most popular programming languages in the world. And something funny is that it's one of the most misunderstood languages at the same time. Because for some reason, I think some people take the time to learn about the library like Angular or React, but they don't take the time to learn JavaScript. So you might heard people saying that JavaScript is awful, or that JavaScript behaves weird, or those kind of things, but it's because at the end it's more likely because they don't understand how actually JavaScript works. All right, so the first thing that the first concept that I'm going to explore here is this keyword. This is a reserved word in JavaScript, and is one that causes a lot of confusion to people. So I'm going to try to explain here how this works in JavaScript. So basically, this refers to the object to which the function belongs to. I know that might sound not clear, but I'm going to show an example to explain that. And something really important to keep in mind is that the type of invocation pattern that is used to invoke the function determines what this refers. So there are 4 invocation patterns that I'm going to explain here so that we can see how this changes based on the pattern that we are using. The first invocation pattern that we are going to see is the one that is called method invocation pattern. And this pattern is basically used when a function is stored as a property of the object. So basically here in this example, and just one thing, I'm going to be switching between the presentation in VS Code and the console in the web browser to show you how all these examples work, so that I think that could be easier to understand. So in this example that I have here, basically this is the definition of a basic object in JavaScript. This is, in this case, this object person defines these properties in which we have first name, last name, ID. And this one particularly is different because in this case, this property, you can see that this is a function. So this function that is defined here meets with this criteria, which is basically that this method is a property of this object. So in this case, this refers to this object. So I'm going to show you this running real quick. So basically here, I'm pasting the exact same example. When I run this code here, if I go here and click, if I go in, I'm basically here, I'm defining person in this variable, and I'm basically invoking the method here. So you can see here that I have this console log to see what this is in this, when I'm invoking the function, and you can see here that this is basically this object. In this case, this is how you could find that this is how probably this works in Java, for example. So in this case, I'm using the method invocation pattern, and then this refers to this object. So let's move on. Somehow, I'm going to leave this here because it could be easier. Now I'm moving on to the next invocation pattern, which is the function invocation pattern. And basically, this pattern is used when a function is not a property on an object. It is invoked in that case as a function. So basically, I'm going to paste that example, there in the console to explain, because it could be easier to understand. So basically, what we have here is the definition. Basically, this is an object very similar to the one that I showed previously. And here I have this property full name. But in this case, I changed this a little bit because I added this function. You can see here that this is a function that is not a property of this object. This is just a function that I'm defining inside this function. And here, what I'm trying to do is I'm going to try to return the length of the name, but see what happens when I run this code. Right? This is happening here. You can see that it says that cannot read property length of undefined. And this is happening because in this case, this is not referring to this object, because you can see that the invocation pattern that I'm using here is I'm invoking this as a function, not as a property of the object. So this is referred by Douglas Crawford. That's the author of a book called JavaScript, The Good Parts. He says, he mentioned in the book that that's an error in the design of the language. because if I go here and print this, if I go here real quick and change this, just to see what this is. Well, you can see here that in this case, this refers to the window object. So if you don't know this, this is going to cause a lot of confusion. But as I mentioned, this is explained as an error, and there are ways to fix this. The first one is, this is something that one approach to handle that issue, and this is something that more likely you can see in legacy code. It still can be code out there that is written this way, but basically this is the exact same example. But what is different here is that I'm defining here a variable called that has the reference to this. So in this case, basically, instead of using here this, I'm using that, which has the correct reference to this object, because in this case, this refers to this object. So if I go and run this code, you can see that this is behaving correctly because this function is intended to return the full name concatenated here and the length of the name by using this function. So by doing this, I'm basically providing to this function the right context. So there is a better solution that was provided by ES6, I think it was introduced, which are the arrow functions. And that's actually the issue that, one of the issues that arrow functions fix. So you can see that this is basically the exact same example again, but what I changed is that here I'm using an arrow function. So in this case, when I use an arrow function, there are two main advantages of using this kind of function, because the first one is that the syntax is more concise. You can see that it's shorter. And in this case, I'm using this here because when you use an arrow function, basically this refers within the arrow function, this refers to the object in which that function was defined. So in this case, sorry, this refers to the object in which this function was defined. In this case, the object is person. So if I go and run this code here, you can see that I'm getting the expected behavior. What I was expecting at the beginning was that this was going to refer to this object. So that's why arrow functions came out, and that's one of the issues that these arrow functions were intended to fix. Well, I already talked about these arrow functions. I already mentioned that they have a more concise syntax, and also that basically by using arrow functions, you get the right context while the function is executed. The other invocation pattern that could be used when invoking a function is when you create a function with a new prefix. Basically, in this case, that function contains, when you use new, that function contains a link to the function's prototype. We are going to see that in an example because the description might not be clear, but basically, I'm going to copy this in the console. So basically here, what we have in this first part, you can see that Basically, this is defining a function that is receiving an string here, and I'm assigning to this property, to status, what is being passed in this function. And in this case, I'm accessing the prototype of this function to add a new method, which is gonna be a public method. And then I'm basically, this method get status is going to return the status. What is different here, you can see that is that in this case, I invoking this function here, but I'm adding the new here. So in this case, this basically is going to create an instance of this function, and by creating this instance, you will be able to get access to the prototype of the function, which is this that is defined here, and then I'm able to get the status. So basically, if I run this here, you can see, well, in this case, I'm writing the console, what is the status? I'm sending here happy, but if I, let's say, change this, you can see that it's changing here. And basically, here, my queue basically is a different instance that I'm creating from this function. And this is a way to implement inheritance in JavaScript, which is something really important. This is the classical inheritance that was provided by JavaScript, is by using this constructor pattern. So it's something really important to know. And one thing here is that you might notice that in this case, this function, it's the first letter is in uppercase, and this is basically to indicate that this function, it should be using the constructor pattern to be invoked, which means that you should add the new keyword before. If not, you are going to have a complete different behavior, because if, for example, if I go and just invoke this function like this, let's pass in something here. You can see here that what this is doing, actually, what I'm doing here is using the second pattern that I explained. I'm just invoking this as a function. And in this case, this is referring to window. So if I go and check window, we are going to see that actually we have this property, not in a new instance, but instead in the window object. You can see that we have here this. So this uppercase here in this function basically is to let other developers know that this should be invoked with the new to get the right behavior. If not, we are going to get a complete different behavior. All right, we already saw this example. And the last invocation pattern that we should know is the apply invocation pattern, which basically lets you choose what's this for the function. There are two ways to do this. Basically, I'm going to show this example in which, let me copy this too. All right, you can see here that basically I have a simple function that is going to return first name and last name concatenated. And what I'm doing here by using apply is that in this first parameter, I'm specifying what this is. So if I run this code, you can see that in this case, if I go here and click, you can see here that when I run this, it's immediately printing John Doe, because this is what this is returning. If I go and change a little bit here, if I go add a new name here, like you can see that this is basically what I'm passing here to the apply. This is first parameter is what is being used as this here within the function. And the other, besides having the apply, you can use also call to invoke the function. And what is different is that, let me show you here. Basically, this does the same. In this case, I'm passing in this first parameter refers to what this is, and it's basically doing the same thing. What is different between the apply and call, because the first parameter is the same. What is different is the second parameter, because you can specify when calling apply or call which are the arguments for that function. In this case, this function is not expecting any arguments, but when you use apply, you have to specify the arguments of the function. If you are using apply, you have to specify those arguments as an array, within an array. If you are using call, then you have to specify one by one the arguments that function is expecting. So basically, those are the four invocation patterns that we should all know in JavaScript. And by understanding those, you are going to avoid a lot of headaches, I think. All right, the next concept that I like to explain is closure. Basically, a closure gives you access to an outer function's scope from an inner function. So I'm going to show this again in an example, because it's going to be easier to explain. So let's see what we have here. So basically here we are defining a function called add. And in this case, let's focus on what this function is doing. This function is defining here a variable counter. And you can see here that this function is actually returning a function, because that's something that we can do in JavaScript. The interesting thing here is that you can see that this function is incrementing the value of this variable that is defined outside, because this is defined in the outer function. I'm incrementing the value and returning counter. And something here to notice as well is that I'm defining the function here, and I'm immediately invoking the function. This is what is known in JavaScript as IIFE, or that stands for immediately invoke function expression, because I'm basically defining the function here, and at the same time, I'm invoking the function. So you can see here that if I go and run this code, if I go and call add actually was returning a function. So by calling this, what this is actually going to do is invoke this function. So you can see that this is basically incrementing the value of counter and returning that value. But I don't have a way outside of this to modify this counter. Through this function, I can make the increments that I need, but there is no way to access to this variable. So in this case, this is basically called a closure, because in this inner function, it is created a link to this counter that is in the outer function. So basically, that's a closure when you are accessing parameters or variables that are defined in the outer function. And this basically lets you define or simulate private properties somehow, because you can see that, as I mentioned, I don't have a way to modify the counter. I have a method to make the changes, but I don't have a way to access that directly. All right. The other concept that is really important to know in JavaScript is variable hoisting, which is a mechanism where variables and functions declarations are moved to the top of the scope before code execution. So let's again see this in an example. So what we have here basically is a function where you can see that I'm first invoking a function, and later I'm defining the function, which you might think that could cause an issue, but it doesn't because of variable hoisting. Basically, JavaScript before executing the code is going to move the definition of the function, say variable, to the top of the function. So in this case, if I go and run this, this is defining the function. If I execute this function, you can see that this is basically executing this without throwing any error, because it doesn't matter if this function is defined at the end of the function, the definition is going to move up to the top of the function, and then that is going to allow us do things like this one. So this is what variable hoisting is in JavaScript. It's a really important concept that it provides an understanding of sometimes, for instance, people tend to define variables inside the if statements, for instance, and they think that if they are using var specifically, they think that that variable is going to be defined inside that statement. But the reality is that actually that, since JavaScript is going to move up all the declarations at the beginning, that is going to be defined in all the function, not just that in that statement. And actually, that's why nowadays we have available let, because when you use let, actually you are defining that variable for some specific scope. This happens when you use var, for instance, or when you are defining a function like this. All right. Well, these were the topics that I wanted to share. Basically, let me see. Basically, I think that as I mentioned at the beginning, from my experience, I have noticed that a lot of people that are currently working in web development, even though they are working on Angular or React or Vue or any other library, when you ask about these concepts, they don't know. And a lot of times, as I mentioned, you face issues that have to do with JavaScript and not with the library indeed. So it's really important to understand the concepts that are behind the scenes to truly manage the whole framework or library. And another thing that I didn't mention is that from my experience, I can say that if you manage correctly JavaScript concepts, it's going to be a lot easier to learn new libraries or frameworks. If you have a strong basis on JavaScript, it's going to be super easy to learn new libraries or frameworks or move between them. So that's why I wanted to choose these concepts. Of course, there are a lot more that can be explored and learned. And basically, this I wanted to share some of the resources that I have used to learn JavaScript. The first one that I read was this book that is called JavaScript: The Good Parts. That book is written. It was written by Douglas Crawford, which is a person who is actively working on JavaScript on the engine, so he knows very well what are the good parts that JavaScript has in the ones that are not that good. So that's a great book. And I have to say as well that the first time that I read that book, I didn't understand most of the concepts. I had to read it twice. And what I did was actually, for instance, with all these patterns that I explained related to this, what I did was trying to find different examples to truly understand how they work, because I know if this is the first time that you see this, might be confusing. And I was confusing the first time that I saw that. So what I did was actually try to run multiple code snippets and see why that was behaving that way, so that I could truly understand each of these concepts. There are much more in JavaScript that you can learn for sure. And the other two books that I think are really good resources, and actually Trinity already mentioned them, which is Eloquent JavaScript. I feel that this is a book that is somehow easier to read than JavaScript, the good parts, but it's a really great resource as well. And you don't know JavaScript, which is free, and it's a really great resource as well, that you can learn a lot about all the JavaScript concepts. And I feel that these three are really great resources to learn about JavaScript. And something that I wanted to mention as well is that if this is the first time that you are seeing this, I would completely understand if you don't understand some of the things that I mentioned. But what I wanted was to sow the seed here, just to go beyond and continue learning about JavaScript, because it's a really nice language. In JavaScript nowadays, there are tons of opportunities, because basically JavaScript is the language that is supported by the most popular browsers. So there is no other language in which you can write code for the browsers, just JavaScript. So there are tons of job opportunities in the web development if you know JavaScript. And obviously, if you also learn JavaScript, you can work on Node, for instance, which is basically use JavaScript, but in the backend side. Knowing JavaScript, moving between the front end and the back end, of course, you will need to learn some other things. But if you manage the basis, is going to be easier to move to the back end. For instance, working with Node, because basically it's JavaScript at the end. So basically this is all what I have. I'd like to know if someone has any question.
Hey, yes, thank you so much, Auxiliadora. Amazing talk. I agree with you. Now we have so many frameworks and libraries and so many tools that sometimes it's easier to go through other roads than actually learning the basics and going hard on JavaScript. I agree that it's something that I think every web developer needs to work on. So yes, thank you so much. Great talk. We have a couple of questions here. What do you think is the most difficult concepts to learn in JavaScript, and which ones are the ones that you like the most?
Well, I certainly added this in the presentation because maybe this is the keyword. This is not that difficult to learn, but it causes a lot of confusion because you need to understand that the pattern that you are using is the one that determines what this refers. So it's not difficult. It's just that you need to truly understand the four patterns. And actually, I really like JavaScript. I find it really fascinating. Well, I don't know if maybe understand these things like variable hoisting. The first time that you try to see that, if you just read the description, sometimes it's difficult to understand what they mean. But if you actually go and run the code, becomes easier to see what the authors refer to these concepts. And the thing that I like most about JavaScript is the fact that you by joining JavaScript with HTML and CSS, you can create amazing things. Actually, nowadays we have all these nice libraries and frameworks, but we can basically create amazing things just with JavaScript and HTML and CSS as well. So I basically find fascinating all the language and the fact that it's misunderstood. So we need to spread the word to let people know that JavaScript is not awful. It's just that you need to learn correctly about it.
We have another question. So we have another question over here that is, do you know any resources or documentation that people can learn how to maybe go through some of these concepts that you explain on JavaScript to TypeScript? That it's something that a lot of companies are using now. So I don't know if you have any resource or documentation that maybe you can let us know about that, maybe these concepts about hoisting and these things.
Yeah, actually, in these 3 books, these concepts are explained very well. So, and as I mentioned, you don't know, JS is a free resource that you can access, and the explanation there is really, really good. Regarding TypeScript, I usually, something that but that's my personal experience. I usually like to go with TypeScript. I like to go directly to the official documentation. The TypeScript documentation is really good. So you can go directly to the documentation that is provided, and there you can find a really good explanation. That's basically the resource that I'm using currently a lot, because I'm currently actually using TypeScript.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Auxiliadora. I don't know if Joe wants to...
Yeah, we continued with the last task. Our last task is for Alejandra Ferreira. And she's told you about the how to access your web development test interview. I think that's amazing topic for finish our meetup. And let's do it, Alejandra. Tell us about yourself.
Thank you so much. Let me know if you guys are seeing my presentation. Maybe, I think that, no, let me check. So do you see it now? Okay.
Yes, we can see.
Okay, so hi, hi everyone. I want to talk to you about this subject that I am kind of passionate about, and it is how to ace your web development tech interview. It's a big title, I know, and you will find a bunch of posts and blogs and tutorials and websites telling you how to crack the interview code and all of that. But I want to show you today some like a real perspective on this. So let me tell you a bit about myself. My name is Alejandra Ferreira. I am a full stack developer, and I am a master in biological science, in microbiology, actually. And I am also a co-founder here in Magenta Codes. So how my journey into web development started, during my master's degree, I started focusing on bioinformatics and getting to know about the tech world and what it meant. But then my life changed suddenly. And this is where I want to, when I want you guys to see that the path to web development is unique for everyone. So I had to go back to my country, and there was not much employment on my area, on microbiology. And I was pregnant. So I decided to take that time and go deep in what I already started, that it was learning to code. So I started doing some online courses and free resources on the internet, and building web projects for friends and family. And eventually I relocated here to Sweden with my family. So I decided to start a bootcamp in full stack development, also to improve my networking and everything that was going on in a new country. So after that amazing experience in the bootcamp, because it was really practical and hands-on on projects, on real projects, I landed an internship in a fashion retail e-commerce startup here in Sweden, and eventually a job in a legal tech company here, also in Sweden. So in all this process, I have been through a lot of interviews, and some of my friends and family might say that too many interviews. And I have seen some patterns of things that recruiters look for, and also some patterns in things that I am missing or I need to work on, you know. And today I want to share that with you. I want to be totally honest in this approach. And tell you some tips on how to survive this. So first we will talk about tech interviews, then some tips to prepare. Then we will go in hands on deck on a real coding assignment, and finally some resources to improve. So job tech interviews, they are intimidating and they are stressful. And whoever tells you otherwise is lying or doesn't have a heart. And you feel like this Barbary ape from the mountains in front of the computer, you know, totally desperate. After this, I'm feeling so stressed about going into an interview and the process, and is my CV okay, and all that I had to go through. I found out that what helps me is to know what to expect, to have clear guidelines in my mind, and be prepared, as much as prepared as you can be for an interview. So, what to expect? Usually, the entire process for web development interviews in tech, and generally in tech, are very long. It might include some of these steps. So first, you will have an initial screening. This is usually something with a person from HR, a recruiter, depending on the size of the company, of course. And it's just a general feeling to check your CV. So this is the moment you have to take advantage to tell your story. What type of opportunities are you looking for? And ask questions about the process. You might also have a logical test. This is optional, and some companies do it, some others don't, but it comes in different formats. So be prepared for maybe online tests with dots or squares or lines where you will have to find some patterns and guess the next possible option. Or even crazier questions, maybe about lions and gazelles in the jungle, or people turning on and off light bulbs. Trust me, I've had these experiences, and they might be somehow very stressful. Then you might also come. It might also come a personality test, and this might be usually online. And these are questions about your personality. If you are an extrovert, an introvert, how do you solve conflicts, for example? If you are a leader, if you're a team player, and much more. In these steps, if you find them, be honest, because recruiters can see through that when they're talking to you what type of personality do you have, and if you make a good cultural fit with the company and the people who already work there. Then you might have a whiteboard interview that is literally on a whiteboard or sometimes even on a paper. And they give you short problems and you have to solve them, maybe handling some data and doing some pseudocode, explaining your process of thinking and how you solve them. And then finally, you might have a coding test. So the coding test might also come in different formats. So you might find like a long list of questions with code snippets, or maybe some theoretical questions about languages. If you're applying for web development, you will have questions about HTML, CSS, JavaScript, some frameworks, some libraries. And it will be questions like very typical questions that we will find, like, what is wrong with this code snippet, or what would the output be? So be prepared for these kind of questions. Also, the code test might be something related, focused on algorithm and data structure. And it might be very similar to the whiteboard interview. But this will be maybe actually in a text editor and coming up with a real good solution, not doing actual code. So this is very common in a lot of companies because they can assess your problem-solving skills and knowledge in certain programming languages. But then there is the coding assignment. And this is what I want to focus today, and this is what I want to talk to you, because this has been gaining some popularity in web development and in the startup and small companies climate. They are implementing this type of test code. So they give you a task, and you usually have to build an app or a game. And this might be for home or on site for a couple of hours with a developer, or now in COVID times, maybe online with somebody pair programming it. So this is kind of like usually how it goes. So this coding assignment, usually these are the three basic tools that they ask you to use: JavaScript, HTML, and CSS, and of course will depend also on the tech stack of the company. They might ask you to use a specific framework, library, or other tool that they use on their daily basis. So I wanted to, after I saw some patterns and some of those things, I wanted to tell you some of the things that I realized that they check. And recruiters and developers, when they look for these coding assignments and you have delivered them, and what do they look for? So they check maybe if you're using third-party APIs, if you're using them correctly, or maybe they ask you to build your own, a small API, an endpoint for extracting some data, something like that. So also they might check some components reusability, organization of the code and the project, and composition, creativity also depending on the company and the industry to display some results, and environment management if you were asked to deploy or integrate maybe a test or more. So what can you build? You can build to prepare and to always have something before you're going into the interviews. You can start practicing with creating a portfolio or games like tic-tac-toe or several weather app, listings app, booking, and things like this. Sorry. So for this talk, I created a repository on my GitHub where you can go and check the real code that I am showing here. This will be shared, of course, also in the final summary of the talk. So how to start? And then, of course, I want to highlight again, this comes from my experience in several coding assignments and some common mistakes or things that I want to improve also. So first, read the problem, read the statement, read it through, and make sure you fully understand it, what they are asking for, what they are telling you to do. if they're asking for additionals or something that is a bonus or a plus, try to work on that. If they're asking for extra creativity because, I don't know, your role is more UI, UX oriented, so try to go for that. But make sure that you understand the problem. And if you don't understand it, then ask questions, because it's a delicate art of asking questions. And I think that most of the developers will understand that it's super hard, especially when you're beginning, trying to come up and approach seniors or other people and telling them, yes, I don't understand this. Can you please explain it? Or I want more details, or I want to know more about the libraries or frameworks or things that I can use for this assignment, you know? So this is a real problem from an interview that I actually did in the past. And this is the statement that they sent me online. So I wanted to show you guys. They were asking me to build a currency converter app where you can see the details of countries, of several countries, the names, population, capital, and also convert an amount into different currencies. And they already gave me some examples of where to get this information. So first, when they gave me this, I already knew, you know, just reading the statement, I just knew that I will have to use a third-party APIs. So I already had some ideas in my mind, you know. The second tip that I want to highlight here, and it is design something. Whether the interview is at home and you have more time, or is it present with a developer or online remotely with pair programming or something like that, take the time to design something. Draw a sketch of what you think is being asked to. So this is the real sketch that I did for this interview. And as you can see, the photo is not that good. But as soon as I started drawing, I started to see some things. I started to see with clarity what they were asking me to build, you know? So I started to notice first, the company had a mobile app. So I decided to go for the mobile version first. Then I identified that I needed a header with just the title, and maybe a drop-down with all the countries, with a list of all the countries, you know? Maybe a couple of cards, because I decided that it was maybe a quick way to display the information that they were asking me, you know, the population, the capital. So I saw that it might be best displayed with a card. And maybe some inputs. In this, I took inspiration, for example, from Google and in other currency apps that are out there, where you have a couple of inputs and you put the amount, and then you decide what currency do you want to convert. So this is kind of what I drew at the beginning. And I cannot recommend it enough. When you start with something so basic like that, a piece of paper and that's it, you have clarity of where you're going, and you start seeing how much time this is actually going to take you, you know? So, of course, if you have more time and your role is UI, UX oriented, or is for a senior role, then step up and use a tool for design. There are a million tools out there. These are widely used. So it is also a plus to show that you're familiar with these tools, that you know them, and then you know to work with them. So we have Figma or Sketch, Adobe XD, InVision, and there are many, many more. So after the design something, usually you may come up with some more questions. So don't be afraid to ask them. Send an email to the recruiter or the developer, raise your voice and do it. Ask questions. And also check the resources. So for example, for this test, I was so sure that I checked the API to convert the currencies. And I was really sure that I could use an endpoint that they had to convert directly the amount to any currency. But then when I saw it to implement, I realized that that endpoint was part of the paid package. So it wasn't free, and I wasn't going to pay for something for an interview. So I had to check for the free endpoints and do a workaround with that. And I instantly realized that I was going to have to do some math to work around this, you know? So that's why it's super important to check that, check the resources, check what the tools you're going to use. And plan an architecture, and this is basic, and even if it's a junior interview and you don't know that much about this, or it's a senior position that you're going for, plan an architecture. So for this app, I was asked to use React, but a lot of times they let you design more things. So plan what tools you are going to use and think about the time you have, the tech stack of the company, for example, and of course, what you already know. This is not the moment to improvise and maybe learn something completely new for an interview. So use what you know and check the time that you have. Also, if you're deploying or they ask you to maybe, host it somewhere else, then you need to choose. Are you going to use GitLab, GitHub Pages, Heroku, Netlify? So choose one of those and start documenting. Very basic, maybe in the README file or something, but start documenting why are you making those choices? Why did you choose React? Why did you choose Axios? Or why didn't you choose any library? Or why did you decide to host it on Heroku? And the answers doesn't have to be too complicated, but it is good that you know why did you choose those things. Is it easier? Is it something that you already know? Or maybe there is a lot of documentation about it, so it's easier and faster to find answers, Or maybe you know that this is efficient, or is it fast? It's going to be faster at the end to use it this way. So be honest about the reasons why you choose the tech stack, but also try to document it always, because after this interview, you're gonna be asked probably to explain why you did this and how you did it. So these kind of things are super important. So, So let's go. This is the moment to implement it. You already designed something, you plan an architecture, you have everything clear. So let's do it. So I started here with something very simple, that it was just building a header. This was a static text, and it gave me the opportunity to start without feeling so nervous if I was being able to do it or not. This was the simplest thing that I could think about, so I just did it. And it was super simple, and gave me the opportunity also to start thinking about how I was going to organize my components and my styles and all of these sort of things. And what I want to highlight with you guys, and then what I want you folks to actually see, is that there is also always room for improvement, and it is super valid that you guys also tell this to the recruiter, to the developer after you explain the code assignment, or maybe in an email when you send the assignment, explain it, that after seeing this, maybe you realize that you could build maybe a header component that is reusable, that it's going to receive children props, or instead of using a div, maybe using a header tag to write a more semantic HTML. So these are the kind of things that you can write in a document and try to explain it, because this process, it's always more important about how you express as a developer, how you solve things, and how you communicate with your team, than rather the actual code that you're doing. So after that, I decided to go for the dropdown. So in here, sorry. I decided that I needed to build a dropdown, a search dropdown with a list of countries. So here I built a component using an input element and a data list HTML element that allows you to create a really fast, complete dropdown. And I started showing, using some of the things that I know by experience that some recruiters are checking in this kind of test, and maybe it's the use of some of the React hooks in this case, because I'm using React. Some React elements like React hooks. So in this case, they use a state. Also, I knew that I had to retrieve all the list of the countries. So I decided to use the fetch API to get the names using the endpoint of the resources that they suggested. So I wanted to highlight also that in this component. Also showing the use of some methods of JavaScript, so like array find, where I will go through each index of the array and until I find a truthy value to the callback. So in this case, the value will be what the user is typing in the dropdown in the input, and returning the values that matches those characters that are down. Also, methods like array.map that creates it was creating me a new array with the results of a function that it was mapping all the list of options of countries. And I want to show you, and I want to be very real and very honest here, and because I want to show you how it started to look. And this was very simple, and this was very not aesthetically nice. But it is what I had for a couple of hours that I had to deliver this coding assignment. So this is how it looks now. What I wanted to check for is a bit of accessibility, so make sure to have a label and other things that, of course, I'm not an expert on accessibility. But if you can incorporate certain elements, even if they are small, even that you don't know, but you are conscious that you need to work on those, that's always a plus for a senior developer that is interviewing you. That's always a plus. And also being something very simple. So here I already saw that the color contrast could be better. So that's something to improve, and that's something that you could write in a document and say, okay, this is where I would like to improve here in this part, you know. After that, I decided to go for the cards. So I built a country card, and it is a component very simple that receives an object, and consciously, consciously I try to implement JavaScript or React concepts that I know that some developers might be expecting you to know or to be aware of. So I wanted to highlight maybe some things like object destructuring to extract some of the properties of the object. And I binding it to a variable country here. Or also showing some conditional rendering to avoid rendering an element, in this case the card, if I don't have any information to put in. And also accessing some of that nested data from the variable that we just assigned. So, you know, some of these are concepts that a recruiter or a developer might look and might be interested in. Then the final kind of component that I had in mind was the currency card. And here I wanted to show how to highlight between other elements that we have here. It's just how to handle secrets and how to handle environment variables. And I needed to use the endpoint to convert the currency, and I needed an API key for this, especially for this resource. So these are the type of secrets that you need to show that you can handle, that you maybe have an idea how to do it. So showing that you can create a .env and a gitignore file, you know, with some of these tools, they will give you an advantage in the interview, because they will show that you also understand some concepts, or at least that you are aware of them. Don't forget your CSS. So if you have more time, invest on making it look so much better. And also will depend on the focus, on the time that you have, and the focus of the position. So if you're applying for something that is more UI oriented, or a senior position where they want you to show something really good, then invest a little bit more time in the styling, in the CSS. So here it's also good to highlight some that you can show that you can use some state-of-the-art properties of CSS, like variables or backup fonts, shorthand properties, and that there is also room for improvement. So after all of that, this is how it looks, the app. And I know it is not pretty, but it's the reality. And this is something that I want to show you, because this is what I can do. And this is what a lot of people might be able to work with a couple of hours that you have to deliver the assignment. So it is not great. Of course, it might look so much better. You may incorporate so many other elements, show that you can use some other libraries and some stuff. But this is what I built at the moment, and it does the job. And what I'm trying to show you folks here is that the reality in some of the blog posts and tutorials and some things that you see, sometimes you see things that looks really nice, and you start kind of thinking, how do they do it? Why cannot I build something like this? And the truth is that, of course, you can, but it's going to take you time, a long time. And it's not going to be something easy to achieve for an interview. So always be real, be honest with what you know, the time that you have, and the kind of position that you are applying to, of course. So do you have extra time? Write the small document that I mentioned, documentation about how to handle the API keys, how you created the project, why did you use all the tech stack that you decided to use, and also what could go better, as I mentioned. Maybe you know that you would like to do something so much better, but you know that you don't have the time. So write that down. Let the developers and the recruiters know that you can do better, that you can learn, and that you can improve. Do you have more time? Then add some tests. That's always a plus. So test the application. And if you don't have that time, then in the documentation also write that, for future approaches, I would use this and that library to test my application. This is key, and it is important. So also think outside the box. And I know because my application didn't look that beautiful. So you will think like, what? Maybe she didn't show us something really nice and creative. But that is something that I'm actually trying to work on, creative solutions. But it's also depending on the industry that you're applying to. So for example, if you're applying to a fintech, show some data with some visualization tools. If it's design related, show something fun that you can do. Is it banking? Then, I don't know, focus on security features. Always try to think first on something that you know, that you can explain, that you can build in a short amount of time. But also trying to show that you can give a little bit more than what they are asking. And finally, I wanted to show you maybe some resources. A lot of you might be really familiar with all of this, but to improve these quick problem-solving skills, you need to work on those. And things like coding katas and exercises to implement quick methods and data structures and algorithms, they might come really handy for the whiteboard interview, for the coding assignment, for everything. So make sure you check some of these sites, because they are really good at teaching you some of these things, and you will practice and practice, and you will get so much better at it. And also because we are talking, of course, of interviews, and you want to get into this step, and you want to manage to get into the tech interview, you need to actually work on the job hunting. So maybe LinkedIn, as Trinity mentioned, might be one of the biggest tools right now. It's your second CV, of course. And I know that everyone says, but network with everyone, go assist to these meetups, and reach to the moderators and reach to the people who are organizing it and reach to the speakers. And always try to network with everyone, because at the end, this is what it's going to give you and open you much more doors. Also, for example, in the interview, and this is something that I do, and you might think that I'm crazy, but in the interview, I always try to check who is the recruiter, and try to check them on LinkedIn. Do some stalking there, and check who is it, what's their background, to see if you can go into in a different position in the interview. Also, if you know who is going to be the developer, or you want to ask who is going to be the developer that is going to assess your coding skills, maybe also check them too, add them to the LinkedIn, and check what are their bases and their path in web development, so you can maybe find something in common, or maybe you have something else to share, Other big platforms like Glassdoor, Indeed, Stack Overflow, these are great resources and have a lot of job postings. And also a personal, if you're in the Scandinavia region, the Hub is a platform that it's amazing for startups to recruit. They do a lot of job posting there, but it is focused on small companies and startups. It's really easy to use, so and that's one of my maybe favorites. So also check that if you're in this region. And last, thank you so much for staying tuned with me. Ask me any questions or suggestions, advices, asking me changes. I will try to address them. The link of the repository will be shared in the summary of the talk, as well as the slides. And reach me, add me to the LinkedIn, connect with me on Twitter and in other social media, because it's important to start doing this networking that we mentioned. Thank you.
Okay, great job and amazing talk, Alejandra. I have a question. What is your recommendation when take control about your feelings? Because I think it is too much work when you take many technical interview, or maybe no is I don't know, the answer that company is no in this moment, no. How take control about that feeling, how continue in this process?
Well, maybe this doesn't apply to everyone, but I am an extrovert. I am an extrovert. I like to talk. So I'm always trying to reach for opportunities and talking with people and trying to network. So that fear of being rejected, I have been losing it a bit because of everything that I have been trying to talk and going to meetups and meetings and knowing new people and telling them, this is what I do, this is what I can do. This is something that I'm learning. This is something that I don't know anything about. So after talking a lot about what you can and what you can't, you start losing a bit about this fear of rejection. And of course, you're going to send, and I have sent a million CVs and applied to a million companies. And that's why I mentioned that I have a lot of experience in interviews and in tech interviews, because I have been through several of those into different steps. And at the beginning, I didn't understand how to do it, and I didn't understand how to accept those no's, and without feeling that this was the end of my coding career, because I also came from a different background. It wasn't computer science. So I felt that fear. But after you do it so many times, you start losing fear about that, because it is not personal at the end. The companies need somebody more experienced, or they just found out that they want something different. So I always try to think, if they don't want me, I don't want to work with that company, no worries. But of course, when you need the job, because sometimes you just need the job, just try to not take it personal and apply for as many options in positions that you find. I know that this has been said a lot, but a lot of men apply to positions when they are 20, 30, 40, 50% ready. And women don't apply until we are 100, 150% ready, because we are afraid of that rejection in the industry. And we have a lot of, I don't know, collective traumas, maybe, applying to all of this. So lose that fear and just go for it. Go for every position that you think that you're a right fit. Go for it, and eventually it will pay off.
Amazing. Thank you, Alejandra. I'm so proud with you, for you. Thank you for to share your amazing experience about the interviews, technical interviews. I think it is helped a lot for many people now in this area. Thank you everyone for joining our meeting. That's all. I'm not sure if we have more questions about that topic. Remember to share that experience in your networks and make them mention our network Magenta codes and Women Tech Makers. That is all. I think it is the end.
Thank you for having me, and I know I am one of the founders here, so thank you everyone also for joining.